the astrologer, when they discovered that Nancy was consulting an astrologer. And interestingly enough, I read as well that when they moved into one of their houses, the address on the house was 666, and he asked for the number to be changed, so it was changed to a different number. And then the book I was reading said that, what was his name? Ronald somebody Reagan, like that, and they're all 6 letters. So his name actually has 3 sets of 6 letters, you know. But he didn't worry about that. So even today, and of course you had, what was the story with Cherie Blair and her New Age advisor, and I can't remember. Usually, notice how it works through the women now. The men are too well sort of protected for these stories to be associated. And of course Hillary Clinton as well. Do you remember the wonderful transpersonal psychologist, Jean Houston, who has a particular exercise? And this is why, you know, using the gutter press as a sort of source of reference is so dubious. You know, what happened there was Jean Houston has a lovely exercise where she says, if you're confronted with a problem, imagine you have a sort of board of advisors, of people who you really admire, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the Buddha, Jesus, whoever, you know, and then imagine, and then talk to them and say, look, I've got this terrible problem, what do you advise me to do? And if you ever try it, you'll find it's extraordinarily effective sometimes, that you do get, now where the advice is coming from is, you know, this could be, who knows where it's coming from. But they got hold of it, and Jean Houston was a friend of Hillary Clinton, and so suddenly it was, you know, the guru advising Hillary Clinton to talk to the dead. So the president's wife was talking to the dead. And I met Jean Houston shortly afterwards. We did a little thing together in Avebury, and she was devastated because from that moment, of course, she had absolutely no contact with the White House at all, couldn't talk to them because of that. So you see how these old ideas still exist in the present day. They're just in a slightly different form. The magician or the spiritual advisor to the ruler. So Dee was doing that as well. It was his idea, I believe. He came up with the first idea of the British Empire. He actually wrote an essay on it, and it was his idea. So he was straddling both those worlds. And he also worked in the realm of science. He was fascinated by mathematics, as many magicians are and were. And so he worked in the field of mathematics. And if you look at the world of science, one of the reasons why I believe as well that there's a return of an interest in magic is that magic combines a scientific approach with a religious approach. At the end of the last talk, Ian, the speaker, was talking about how we need both this sort of spiritual approach and a mundane, reality-based approach as well. And this is what the magician does. The magician has a fundamentally spiritual relationship with themselves and the world and reality. But they also are interested in how the universe works and are more interested in truth than in adhering to dogma. And so the early magicians were scientists. And so when they did their chemical and alchemical experiments, they were also praying, but they were also manipulating matter in order to determine results and effects and so on. And there was a wonderful magician in London, Robert Flood, who had learned the art of spagyrics from Paracelsian alchemy. And Paracelsus was a Swiss physician who said, I'm not interested in alchemy in order to get physical gold. I'm interested in the gold of medicine that can heal and that can prolong life. And so he devoted himself to applying the magical and alchemical understanding to working with plants and metals and even animal products in order to create medicines. So he was a sort of founding father of modern medicine in some ways. But he applied alchemical principles to it. And he developed a method called spagyric medicine, which still exists today. There are alchemists today in England who are bubbling mixtures together and making spagyric medicine. Robert Flood in London, at the time of the plague, he stayed, he helped to cure people. There was Simon Foreman as well. So there were magicians who were working in the field of medicine. And now at the cutting edge of medicine, if you look at some of the latest placebo research and the work of, I think we should be very proud of the fact that in Britain we have another Louisian actually, who is the professor, Britain's first professor of complementary medicine at the University of Westminster. And some of the work that's being done now is exploring this interface between the mind and the body, this area that is indeed magical. And so we have as well the area of the arts. And the area of the arts is an area that I'm particularly interested in because in the Druid tradition, which is the indigenous spiritual tradition of these islands, it's a tradition that places great store on the arts and the value of the arts. And it works with the understanding that there's a way in which the other world is filled with an energy that we call awen, or inspiration, that flows into this world too. And that by working in specific and magical, if you like, ways, we can attract more awen into our lives and be more creative in our lives. It's based upon the understanding that creativity doesn't just come from our own personal subconscious, that it can indeed come from that place, and we can sometimes recognize when we're being creative the particular elements that have made up that new theory we've had, or painting we've painted, or whatever. But there's also a belief in Druidry, as in any spiritual tradition really, is that there's a source beyond our own personal subconscious which is filled with creative energy, and that if we open ourselves to that, that can flow through us. And it was Tchaikovsky who said we should at least go halfway to meet inspiration. And so spiritual practices, magical practices, when they're working in the realm of the arts, suggest that if we work on ourselves in a magical way, we can perhaps be more creative. Good example of somebody who worked in both magic and the creative arts is, of course, W.B. Yeats, who was a member of the Golden Dawn magical order, and was the great poet, of course. So we can see now how the magician as a figure is peculiarly contemporary, peculiarly needed and apposite to the time we're finding ourselves in now, where one particular religion or box can't hold us because we have tasted the fruit of forbidden knowledge, because we've been on to Google and we've found out things that we couldn't find anywhere else about some other religion. And we've realized that spirituality and the spiritual life is like a great river, and that every religion is fed by a number of tributaries. That it's not totally hermetically sealed and self-contained, but it's made up of a number of inspirations and tributaries. And we ourselves are like that. And we can feed from all these different tributaries, which are in fact part of the whole ecosystem. So this requires a kind of reorientation, because to begin with, of course, we can get lost and feel disoriented and want the safety of one particular faith or one particular set of dogma. But if we can open to the beauty of this, to the fact that we're on this one planet with this fantastic heritage of spiritual and scientific understanding of knowledge, then we can shed some of those layers of conditioning that have forced us into the narrow paths that perhaps our minds have traveled down, and start to really grow and change. When am I supposed to stop? I don't know how long that's been. Sorry? 20 minutes, fantastic. Okay. So where were we? So yes, particularly apposite to today, because what we need now is, it would be foolish to turn our backs on science because of the huge strides, the immense amount of knowledge and help that it's been in the world. But I believe it's also foolish to turn our back on the inspiration, the comfort, the nourishment, the insight, the philosophical depth that has been developed by the world's great religions, and by the world's small religions too, and by spiritual paths in general. And it's as if magic offers us some way of working in that sense. If you look at, say, one stream of magic, say the alchemical tradition, you discover that being an alchemist You can be a Christian alchemist, you can be a Sufi alchemist, there are Jain alchemists, Hindu alchemists, Buddhist alchemists. Alchemy runs like a kind of hidden seam